Delays have been identified as the root cause of administrative corruption in the country. That's according to research findings by the Ghana Integrity Initiative and the Private Enterprise Federation on using service delivery charters to promote business integrity in the country. From the perspective of the private sector, the delays are attributable to sluggishness and incompetence of mostly staff, bureaucracy, among others. Similar trends were seen in the public sector, though lack of resources were a major issue in the public sector. Some of the public institutions surveyed were the DVLA, the Registrar General's Department, the Environmental Protection Agency, as well as the Passport Office. Let's now break it all down. Joining us via Zoom is Clara Berry Kasati, who is a lawyer and lecturer at the Gimpa Law School. We shall also be having Nana Osei-Bonsu, the president of the Private Enterprise Federation. Gentlemen and ladies, we're so grateful that Kasati from the University of Ghana, as well as the president of the Private Enterprise Federation. Gentlemen and ladies, we're so grateful that you joined us for this particular engagement. I want to start off with you, Mr. Bonsu. What exactly remains your input when it comes to using service delivery charters to promote business integrity in the country? If you could kindly unmute so we could hear you better.
I said the name is Nana Osei-Bonsu, not Bonsu. But the essence of the federation's investigation and endeavor into this exercise is because the private sector is required to perform under certain regulations. Sometimes they're oblivious of the regulation. Sometimes the regulators themselves don't have capacity.
Sure.
And they don't lift whatever is required on the private sector. So at least they become comfortable and procure the services. So what we had done previously with LUPSA, land use and spatial planning and others, was to find out what their difficulties, their challenges, that these regulatory institutions need to do to empower themselves to be able to administer what is the services they're supposed to give to private sector. Now, for the private sector, knowledge of and information is critical. So if they don't know it and they don't have the way of getting that information, they're not going to be able to meet the requirements. We engage the services of the lady lawyer that you have there, Lady Kasati, and some other players to assist us to identify the challenges by the regulatory institutions. Sometimes it's capacity, sometimes it's resource, sometimes it's just that the law doesn't support it. By so doing, we are able to empower private sector to identify what they need to know to make sure that this service charters that these institutions are supposed to use to administer the regulations are so succinct that nobody else can do otherwise with it. Now, you mentioned corruption. Corruption has been one of the basic things that plague private sector when you're getting licenses, certification, and other forms of permits. So when the regulatory institution doesn't have the capacity, when they don't know what to do, then the private sector is left wanting. Now, sometimes they don't have capacity, as I said earlier. Let me give you one institution which is supposed to have 50 inspectors in 2 inspectors per each district.
All right.
They only have 50 inspectors for the whole nation. How many regions do we have? How many districts do we have? So assuming the private sector is seeking the permit from this institution, they will have to sometimes provide the kind of vehicle for them to go see the inspection, the location for the inspection, and otherwise. And by so doing, it creates some kind of unsavory kind of activity.
All right.
Now, this time around, we engage.
If we could bring in Lady Kasati there, because considering your legal backing, we do know that matters of corruption are mostly issues that, of course, conflict the regulatory framework when it comes to legalities. But having read this particular report, having understood the origins of corruption, which, surprised to say, stems from inefficiencies at the public sector, where do you fix your concern regarding the import of this report?
The concern is that if the real intention is to deal with corruption or to tackle corruption in the public service delivery system, then yes, we have to focus on the root cause of the corruption, which, as I indicated, has been delays. So the main motivation for corruption from the private sector has been to avoid the delays, because the cost of the delays on them is far more outweighs the cost of the bribe that they will pay. So the motivation usually has been the delays, which then means that if we want to tackle corruption, we must see how to tackle the unnecessary delays so that public service is delivered efficiently to the private sector. That would be a key way to addressing corruption in the public sector.
But beyond that, finally, what do you proffer as the suitable recommendations? You've stated that we need to deal with matters of delays, but moving forward, how do we consolidate recommendations to ensure that corruption within the public sector is a thing of the past?
Three things. All that we have recommended can be summed up in three things. For this particular project, as Nana was indicating, we were focusing on one is the use of service delivery charters. Service delivery charters, if effectively implemented, is able to address a lot of the challenges that give rise to corruption. One is information. If you have an effective service delivery charter, it contains all the information that the private sector needs. So there is a one-stop shop document they can go to, and they know what is required. It indicates the fees, it indicates the timelines, it indicates complaint mechanisms that must be enforced, which also must go hand in hand with sanctions when public officers delay in the provision of services. So using the service delivery charter, we ensure transparency. There is the right to information that would come with it. And most importantly, it will also lead to change of attitudes, because it seeks to re-engineer the focus of public services to service delivery, people-centered, because then you know that you have an obligation to provide efficient services rather than power to exercise over people, as well as the people also seeing that they have a right to efficient service delivery. It's not a favor being done them. And not just that they have a right, the mechanisms in a service delivery charter allow the citizenry to hold accountable the various public officers in those institutions. So it makes the public officer focus on service delivery, as well as making the private sector or the general public empowered to be able to hold accountable and ensure that there is transparency, because part of the issues that result in corruption is lack of transparency, lack of the right information, who does what. All of these ones, an effective implementation of a service delivery charter is able to cater, in addition to automation of services, as well as definitely resourcing the particular agencies to provide the services that we look at. One of the recommendations in that line is that we have to take another look at some of the legal provisions that allow some of the entities that the fees paid to them go to the consolidated fund. I think we need a discussion around that area so that some of the fees, we look at the fee fixing system in service delivery charters and ensure that the fees are retained in-house so that they are able to address some of the basic needs of the agency. For example, paper. There is no reason why you should go to a public agency and then the issue there is paper, and there is a whole bureaucratic process to follow to be able to get money to buy the paper. So we have to revisit the fee fixing and fee retention system in the country.
Well noted. Look, as a team, we're so grateful for your input. So are we grateful to the president of the Private Enterprise Federation who joined us earlier.